cool about this is how he connects, like when there's somebody that you're correcting, like be careful that you don't fall into that, because it so happens all the time. I mean, who was it? Was it one of the big televangelists of the 80s who had the major fall? So you see this connection, and I see it in my own heart. When there's something that I'm majorly judging someone else about, there is an open door for that sin to start in my life. And so like the connection between judging it in someone else and it starting in you is real.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, Michael, I can totally see why you posed your question with prominent church leaders. If I'm understanding your question correctly, what you're asking is, do we do this verse? Are we doing justice to this verse? Are we following this decree? And our baseline sometimes is to say, okay, well, we all saw this happen. We all saw this person fall from grace. Was it swept under the rug? What I felt personally convicted about is you got to watch your step, correcting other people, restoring other people, because it does say gently, but it also says restore. And so I think that there's a two-part heads up and a warning in that verse, because I either have a pride problem or a permission problem. Sometimes I'm inclined to be like, oh, that feels like a green light to me. That feels like permission to me. And so the restoring, gently or otherwise, never happens.
I don't know how we draw a distinction now, because it kind of feels like judgment, like, oh, this person's sin wasn't bad enough to warrant that, and this person's was, so we're putting judgment on things, and we really shouldn't. But I don't feel like Paul was lovingly restoring the Judaizers. I feel like he took it to them hard
and restored someone after they do that. So these guys haven't done that yet.
They haven't repented.
Yeah. So
right.
They're still being caught. And most of the time, like people, you agree, like maybe it'll take a while, but you messed up and you agree with them. And while that's not necessarily the same as repenting, it's pretty close.
When he says caught in a sin, does he mean like somebody opened the door and found them, or that they're stuck, like caught like a trap? Because to me, that's two totally different vibes.
I think it probably means both.
But wouldn't you want rescuing in either of those situations?
Well, I'd probably want it if I couldn't get out of it, but if I was in the middle of it, I wouldn't want it. Yeah.
Right. Well, you need it whether you wanted it or not, probably.
And he says, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. So if we are living by the Spirit, it doesn't say who committed what wrong. It says that we're supposed to restore them gently if we're living by the Spirit. But the problem I have with that verse is he says they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. And I understand the meaning of that completely. I'm not dense, but I don't like the word pride. And it just kept bringing me back to Proverbs, where they say repeatedly how terrible pride is.
Yeah, and also pride is such a shallow word in English, right? Like you're proud of your son because he has a 4.0 GPA, and it doesn't mean the same thing as the pride I feel when I see in sin, So I think that what he's saying is basically like you can have confidence in this.
Yeah. Well, a lot of us did the 2 Corinthians class, and he uses pride in that book more than any other. And it does rub us wrong, because it's just like, what's good about that? And even the Greek word is like kalkima, which sounds kind of like an obnoxious word, but yeah, it has to be something different than what we normally.
Well, and I agree with Joseph about the testing of yourself and stuff. Test me, know my anxious thoughts, see if there's any offensive way in me. Like, we're invited way back to the Old Testament to, I mean, I think the cool thing about God, and it's really easy to overlook when we feel overwhelmed, is that it feels like he really does give us a way out. He's like, look, I know this is hard and heavy. I know this is big, and this whole human walk is not easy. It wasn't even easy for Jesus. It just wasn't easy. I understand that, and you can always come to me. And so I think it's, and also, I don't know about any of you, but it's better for me to get my mind right before the hard things come. And
I'm really intrigued by the idea of the average believer holding each other accountable, which is what this seems like it's doing. And I
Yeah.
think in church, it's like, well, that's the pastor's job. And it's just another way of disconnecting and not really being united together. And I love the thought of doing that. Having said, if people can do it gently, what I think we're all used to, or what I'm used to, is busybodies who are correcting everybody all the time, who make the rest of us not want to correct anybody because it's just like, I don't want to be like them.
It doesn't work outside of relationship.
Amen.
Right.
Paul does make a distinction between public sins and let public people, like in 1 Timothy 5, he talks about if an elder is caught in sin and there's multiple witnesses, bring him before the whole church, which it's like, oh my gosh, and it's like the level of their visibility is where the level of their correction should take place. And I've seen that go bad. I was an area pastor, and there was a guy whose wife was struggling. And so they pulled the male pastor in front of the church and rebuked him because his wife was having some struggles. And what Paul says, public people call him out. And I think that's what he's doing with the Judaizers. So it doesn't mean they're not in the church. It just means that their sin is huge. And I think he does it with Peter. He does not seem to be restoring Peter gently. He seems to be calling Peter out publicly in the first couple chapters. And
Yeah.
I'm sure the two of them had to kiss and make up. And it seems like they did.
Well, I think a great way to test your own actions is just to ask someone you trust if something you've done crossed the line or not. I think that's the easiest way a lot of the time. And it'll oftentimes get you the most honest and truthful answer. I just love a group of people and asking interesting questions and growing together.